Hello and welcome to Guai Gaming, where we are doing a little Tiermaker video. For those of you who don't know, I'm moving house this weekend, so I'm unable to do any streaming. But since I've finished the island and I'm playing it again, it's on two different maps. At the moment, I'm playing the island on my mammals run and on my server. I think I've finally got enough experience to maybe do a little Tiermaker list of all of the different tames you can tame on the island. Now, before we start, I just want to clarify this is from a single player perspective. So, some tames that have really powerful niche roles that they fill in PvP are going to be ranked really low in this tier list because it is a single player tier list. The way I'm going to do it is D tier are things that I just basically think you shouldn't tame. Like, there's flat out no point in taming them. C tier, they fill a niche. You know, you can tame them if you want to fill that little niche or to do what it is they do, but they don't necessarily do it very well. B tier are they're good. They're good dinos. You know, you might want your B tier to do certain stuff. A tier are the leaders in their field. They're the best at what they do. And S tier are the best dinos. The things that, if you're playing a meta playthrough, I personally would advise you to always tame. First things first, the bottom of the bottom, the worst tames, the things that, in my opinion, my very humble, slightly still beach bob opinion, that you can feel free to argue against to your heart's content in the comments. The ones that I don't think you should tame, starting off the spider, the Irano. I don't see the point for it. You can't ride it. If you really, really, really wanted to try and make an argument for its usefulness, you could say that its web shots would be useful in taming some small, fast creatures, but that's such a weak argument, and I don't think you should ever bother taming it. The Archeo, I'm not going to try and pronounce that dude. He has one specific thing that you can do with him on the island, and that is you can get from point A to point B in the tech cave with him. He can let you fly in the tech cave, essentially glide down to the end of the tech cave. And I just don't think that that's worth it. If you did that, you'd have to leave all your tames behind. You'd have to fight the Overseer by yourself. It's such a small niche role that's utility and usefulness is very arguable that I would put it in the never bother taming it box. And then, of course, there's the Athelplura. PvP, amazing. It can melt whatever structures you want to shoot it at. In single player, it's pointless. You want to tame it with good efficiency, you're going to need Broths of Enlightenment. What a silly thing to require to need for it. Is it a very enlightened bug? I don't know. I would never tame that, and I would advise people to never tame it. The turtle, the Carbonemis. It's slow. Sure, you could again say it's tanky, and you could again, if you really wanted to make the argument for it, you could say that it would be good to stick in the tentacles of a Tooth is why you tamed it. But there are other things that do just as good a job at that and can do other things. I would never bother taming a Carbo. Carno Taurus. The Carno. I really think the Carno is a dreadful tame. By the time you are ready to tame a Carno, you should just skip it and tame an Aloe, or even just go straight for a Rex. The difficulty in taming of them, the resources, materials required, the sort of position you need to be in during your playthrough, it's advanced enough to tame better things, and I just would never bother trying to tame a Carno. Unfortunately, compies also go here. They're adorable. I think compies are great. I absolutely love them, but they serve no purpose in single player. In PvP, I imagine you could use them as little guard dogs, which would be quite adorable, but in single player, they serve no purpose. The Dimorphodon, same thing. Again, you've got tiny little niche roles where you could argue it's useful, like maybe in the Crouch Cave or something, but it serves no purpose, no greater purpose, and is not worth the effort of taming. Just like the Diplodocus, who, if you upset him, will gently nudge you until you apologize or eat him. No. Dodo. Sorry, Dodo Whisperer. There's no point to it. There's no point to taming it. You can kill it for meat early on, but taming it would just be a waste of time. Now, I think all of those are fairly like common opinions. I don't think I've said anything controversial yet, but maybe this one might upset someone. Donkey. The Dunkelosaurus is pointless. It can harvest resources underwater, but that's such a niche thing to do that I don't think it gives any benefit. There are vastly better water tames worth your time in taming. Just go on land and use an Anki if you want resources. I would never bother taming a donkey. And here it is. The big one. The one that I am very scared of and should not be scared of. Where are they? The electric eels. I really like the electric eels in terms of their aesthetics. I think the electric eels are gorgeous, but they just don't serve a purpose. The same as Hesperornis and a few of the other little birds. There's just no point in them. Now the next one does have a purpose, but I just don't think its purpose is very useful, and that is the Hyaenodon. Hyaenodon, sure, you can put the little pack on it and it will spoil meat slower, but you could do that with a racer and a platform saddle and a preserving bin, and yeah, it would cost more, but it would just be infinitely better. The Hyaenodon preserving meat is not a useful skill in the long run. I don't think it's worth the effort you would have to go to tame them. Same as with an Ichthy. I would never bother taming an Ichthy or a Gallimimus or a Caprosuchus. I suppose you could argue that Caprosuchus has like more of a combat utility than any of these ones, other than maybe the Carno. But it's just a smaller, more annoying Sarco. So if you want a crocodile, you just go for a Sarco. The Caprosuchus just doesn't do anything for you. The Kent, it's, again, there's just a bigger, better version of it with the Stego. Just go for the Stego instead. Alright, Listy. I know you can technically get an XP boost from it, but I tried this in Aberration, and it was so negligible. I just gave up. I don't think the effort of taming it and patting it every 5 minutes or whatever you need to do makes it worth having. Manta, no. There's, again, infinitely better things to have in the water. Unfortunately, this one is a really good tame, just on different maps. The Megalosaurus is fantastic on Aberration, but on ARK it just wants to sleep too much of the time for it to be worth it. Microraptor falls into the same box as things like the Compy, the Dimorphodon, and the Archaeo. They don't have a purpose when you're looking at single player. The time and effort it would take to make a little flock of micros could be spent breeding up direwolves or rexes, or something that actually has more utility. Although I did tame one of these on the island, I think the Onyx is useless as well. The bats, you can't ride them, they're a pain to tame, or they were for me anyway, and they serve very little utility. Base game Patchy is dreadful. Both of them, they don't really do anything at all. Pego, just no purpose to having a Pego mask. You are only ever going to tame one of those by accident. Pegalonis, I don't think I ever bothered trying to tame one of them. I think they're the one with the annoying taming mechanic, but I don't think I ever tried to tame one of them. Plesiosaur, absolute little bastards. They will come out of nowhere when you're minding your own business in the ocean and try and get you. I really don't like plesiosaurs, but when I did eventually tame one, I found they're useless. They have such a small attack radius, they have a huge turning circle. Not good. Not good at all. Scorpion, it's weak, it does low torpor, so the gimmick it has in that it does torpor damage is eclipsed by a horse. It's not good. Perlovia, while they haunt my nightmares and waking dreams, then there's no point taming them. You can't ride them, you can't use them as like a trap. Like you could in PvP, for example, you can order them to burrow, I think, and that is either a safe way of storing things or you can use it to ambush other players. In PvE, there's no point in doing any of that. In single player, there's even less of a point doing it. Contentious one, the raptor. Raptors in ARK are very bad, other than on Aberration, where they have that gimmick that works for them. I think raptors should all have that pounce attack, and I think players riding the raptors should be able to like pounce onto other creatures and like have like a hanging on and biting a few times mechanic. I think the raptors should have like a mechanic where they have decent damage, they're very fast, but they have really low health, and then they have some gimmicks like the pouncing attack to make up for that really low health. So they should be a skill-based tame. You know, they should be something that requires skill and timing to use well, and if that's done, then they're really good. But at the moment, they're just weak. At the moment, they're weak. If you want to pack tame, get a direwolf. If you want something that's like fulfills its same role on land, get a Barry. Just raptors are pointless. Titan boa, pain in the ass to tame and no usefulness once it is tamed. Same, well, not quite the same, but a trilobite, no usefulness when it's tamed. And finally, Troodons are like the even worse cousin of the Compy because they're just horrible to tame. I have to feed your tames to them in order to get them tamed. So that is my D rank of creatures on the island. You've got a lot of stuff there that I think doesn't fulfill any particular role, or the role it fills is so unnecessary, or it does such a bad job of filling that role that you end up with tames that I would advise people to just never bother taming. Like, if you get a trap up early enough and you get raptors in your trap, kill them. Just kill them for hide and meat. Mostly hide. They're not worth the effort, they're not worth the narcotics. Just skip them and go for something else. Next, we have the C tier tames. Tames that, you know, are maybe worth taming, but aren't going to give you the best bang for your buck. If that makes sense, you can definitely tame these. I would never say not to tame them, but I would always give you a caution that they're maybe not going to be the best at what it is that they do. And the first one in that group is an Allosaurus. And I know some people really like Allos, but they're almost like Rexes in terms of the size, difficulty to tame and whatnot, and the amount of tranks you need to put in them. They're obviously not quite as hard as a Rex, but they're up there. And I think the reward you get for that is very low. On the island, you don't really need their pack boost to kill other things unless you're hunting a Giga, which even then I would use other stuff to hunt a Giga. You could take them into the boss fight and get their buffs against the boss, but I don't think they do their bleeding damage against the boss, and their lack of health and DPS is going to hurt you when you could have just gone for Rexes. Next we have the anglerfish. Anglerfish you can use to get lots of silica pearls, but silica pearls aren't overly difficult to get, especially when you start floating around in the sea. So while it does have a niche, I wouldn't say it's that great of a niche, basically. Brontosaurus. I really personally love the Brontosaurus, but if I'm doing this list based off what I would advise other people to tame, I would have to put the Bronto here. For me, I love Brontos. I think they're great, but they require a lot of resources to tame, and they're big, and it takes time, and they're very slow, but they are good berry collectors. So, you know, you can put them in C. We'll put them in C, and if you want a big berry collector, that's your big berry collector. Chalico. It's not a bad tame, but its taming method is such a pain that he's down here. He can hold his own with some of the A and B tier in terms of fighting, but they're going to be easier to tame, and they're going to have other things that they can do. This guy is a difficult to tame creature who is only really useful at, you know, fighting and berry collecting and stuff, but there are so many berry collectors, so I'm putting him in C. Dilophosaur. Now, I know I put the raptor down here and the Dilophosaur up here, and there's probably someone getting really annoyed at why the beautiful raptor is down here while the silly Dilophosaur is up here, and it's for a simple reason. you can punch the Dilophosaur and tame it with your bare hands. It's not a good tame, but it's in C because the role it fulfills is baby's first carnivore. You know, you punch a Dilophosaur a few times, it falls over, you give it some meat, you have a carno. Carnosaur. Carnivore. You don't have a carno. You do that a couple more times, and you've got a little personal guard that'll follow you around and will really impact your early game. So I think they're a useful tame. Obviously, their usefulness drops off incredibly quickly, but they have more of a purpose than anything down here. Next, we have the Dimetrodon. He's not useless. He has a role. I used them extensively on the island on my first playthrough. I don't think I would use them again, because I think they're a pain, and aircon units are easier. But if you're struggling for resources, or if you've built really far away from Mel, these guys could be bred, and you could have multiple of them to help you in your hatchery. Moss Chops, I don't know why we've skipped the alphabetical. I think my reference list isn't in alphabetical order anymore. Moss Chops is fantastic. It is a great first tame, because you don't need to do anything to it. You just need to walk up to it and give it what it wants a few times. And I suppose you need to pray that it doesn't change its mind halfway through and go from wanting a Tinto berry to wanting raw prime fish or cooked prime meat, or what, you know, when they get really picky, giant bee honey, that can be frustrating. But they're a great early berry tame. They're a great early fiber tame. You can ride them without a saddle. They increase your tankiness a lot in the early game. They increase your damage output by quite a bit because they've got quite a powerful bite. They're just a useful early game tame. And in a similar way to they're a really useful early game land tame. The Diplosaurus, I can't pronounce that one, is a really useful early water tame. If all you want to do is quickly shoot in and out of the water to grab some stuff from down in the water, that is a great tame. The Equus, and we'll put the Unicorn up with him straight away because they are the same tame. I think the Unicorn is literally just a cosmetic difference. Good carry weight, good torpor kick, but they're not specialized in carrying any particular resource. The fact that their saddle is a mortar and pestle is very useful on Scorched, but less useful on the island. So they're decent, but they don't fit any specific role, and they don't fulfill any role very well. Gigantopithecus. Tame it if you want. Why do I always do that? We'll call him Yeti, the Bigfoot. He's fine. Like, the fact that you can sit on his shoulder and he can throw you and stuff. If you wanted, you could make some really useful niche stuff out of that. But he doesn't deserve to be any higher. I'm not putting him in the D because I'm not saying you should never tame him, but he's definitely the bottom of the C rank. The Dolphin is a great, fast, passive early water tame, sort of similar to this guy, but he is going to get outstripped incredibly quickly. But you can use him as a stepping stone to get to better water tames. Now, I'm going to put the Iguanodon here, and I'm going to put the Parser here as well. I'm going to put them in at the same time rather than going in like any alphabetical order or anything, because they fulfill a certain role. And they're like your early game mounts for traveling, for, you know, doing a little bit of resource farming, and they're also berry collectors. I think you could pick whichever one you want. I think the Parser has higher weight and the Iguanodon is faster, so that's just like personal choice between those two. But they're both very good early game herbivore mounts. I've lost it. There it is. Megalina. Almost in D, but he has one thing he does, and it's really good. He can climb really well. He can climb upside down on ceilings and stuff. Now, if you wanted, you could use that to help you get through caves, especially the hard ice cave. But other than that, it's not a very useful tame. It has that one niche that it does that no one else does quite as well, but it's not very useful other than that. The deer are fast. They're really fast on land, especially the female ones who get a 25% speed boost but lack the ability to attack. You get one of them in stamina, With their jump, you can travel across land very quickly and quite safely as well, because they can just outstrip most things that would try and harm them. Megalodon. Megalodon is your first decent water combat tame. It's the only one. It's, you know, other than this, they get very big and powerful. You want a water tame. A few Megalodon are going to carry you quite far, I think. I've spoken to people who don't like the Megalodon, but I think their little pack bonus and stuff makes them a lot more useful than people give them credit for, especially when you look at how badly... So if you go into some of the water caves and you take like basilos with you, the AI-controlled basilos that you've tamed do a really bad job of positioning themselves in those fights, because they're just too big and the caves are too small. But if you're on a basilo, and you can focus on getting rid of like the electric eels and the jellyfish, a little horde of Megalodon behind you can do some work. You know, while things are aggroing onto you, and they just chomp away at it, because they're easier to get themselves into position and things. I think they're good. I think they're okay. Mesopithecus is, you know, fine. He has all the roles of a shoulder pet in that he gives, I think it's 25% weight reduction for anything you put in him. And I think Mesopithecus can throw poop at things that are attacking you. So it's not quite a D tier, but when you compare it to your other shoulder pet on the island, it's not even close. Alright, a bit more of a contentious one now. Mosasaurus. Why would you ever tame a Mosasaurus? It's not quite a plesiosaur, but they're ridiculously hard to tame. Their turning rate is dreadful. Their speed isn't very good. Just no, they're just a pain to tame for such a small reward in terms of their power in the water. Oviraptor is fine, don't really think it's very necessary. You can use fertilized eggs for your farms. If you have a big enough farm, you're going to get a ton of eggs. I don't really think you need an Oviraptor for much, but he's there because he fulfills a role, the same as the Orvis. Don't look how happy he is. I know that you could use the Orvis for hide and for mutton, for taming, but I think you're better off just going for kibble. I think the difficulty of taming these with the sweet veggie cakes, breeding them, carrying one around, killing it every time you need to tame something, I think that's more hassle than it's worth. Just go make kibble. Phymonia is really useful, but in short bursts. Like, having one in your base is a really good idea, in my opinion, because one day you're going to go into your greenhouse and realize that you've got no fertilizer left. And if you've got a Phymonia, if you've got a poop pig, all you have to do is put a few stacks of narco berries in him, hold the button down, and you've got fertilizer for days. You've fixed your farm. So I think he has a really good niche role, and I think he does it really well, but that you're going to use him very rarely. Sabertooth is just weak. The Sabertooth is just weak. Like, he looks great, and he's so cool, but he's weak. He needs, like, a bleeding attack or something. He just... I don't know. He needs a bit of TLC, I think, in terms of what he can do. Pteranodon is your first flyer. It's down here because it is the first flyer. It's not a great flyer. It's not overly fast. It doesn't have huge amounts of stamina. It can't carry anything. If you pick up a pebble or something and try and get on him, he's not going anywhere. But he's a flyer, so he is useful. He's the first one you're going to get. Terrorbird. Now, I showed my rankings for these to someone, and they pointed at the Terrorbird, pointed at the Raptor and went, why is the Terrorbird in C and the Raptor's in D? And I'll tell you why, because the Terrorbird is actually fucking useful, and the Raptor's not. Terrorbird is such a better explorer than the Raptor, because you can chuck yourself off cliffs and flap those little wings, pump those little wings so you don't die. That can save you if something's chasing you, or just if you get distracted and you run yourself off a cliff. We all do it sometimes. It's not just me. Trust me, we all do it. The other thing the Terrorbird can do, which I love personally, is it can fit through wooden doors and metal doors, which makes it such a good bait dino. It's faster than you. It's a little bit, if you level it in the right way, it can be a little bit faster and a little bit tankier than you. You can run up to something on it, peck at them or shoot at them, turn around and just run up the stairs into your trap and then out the door. It's brilliant. If something catches you, sometimes you run into your trap and you don't quite get the door, you jump off the Terrorbird and you escape while your Terrorbird gets eaten. I think they fill a great role. They're not B or A, but I really like Terrapers personally, and I think they're really cool. Okay, Triceratops. It's a good berry collector, but there are better ones, and I used them, and I just never could feel, and they never felt right for me. I'm sorry if you love Triceratops, but they just never quite felt right for me. Woolly Rhino. Okay, so the Woolly Rhino has the potential to do massive amounts of damage, but we're looking at this from a single player PvE perspective, which means you are going to not want to be sat on a Woolly Rhino, you're going to want to sat on something else in, for example, boss fights. So one of their biggest things that they do, they just can't do, unfortunately, in single player, because they can't do that charge unless they're mounted by a player. So that puts them in a less than ideal situation. You could use them if you wanted, and you could get that damage out of them, but you'd be better off riding something else and relegating them down here to the C tier. So that is all of the C tier dinos in ARK. These are all things that you can tame and that do useful stuff for you, but that other things definitely do better. Yeah. So these are all useful, but they're all vastly outclipped by B, A, and definitely S tier dinos. So if you have no choice, you pick one of these. If you see like a 150 Allo or a 30 Rex, get the Allo, obviously. But if you see a 75 Allo and a 75 Rex and you have to tame one of them, you get the Rex, is what I'm saying. On to your B tier dinos. These are dinos that are just good. Like, the way you describe them is just, they're good, they're useful. They're not amazing, and they're, good, amazing, you must have, is basically where we're at now, okay? So, the snail, it's good. It produces cementing paste. That is good. It's not amazing, and it's not you must have it, because it requires the sweet veggie cakes, which is just a pain. Frog. You go through the swamp cave a couple of times with the frog, and you're going to get a ton of cementing paste. It's good. It is really good. You don't need it. You can farm it in other ways. You can farm it with snails. You can farm it manually, but it's good. It is good. It does, massively reduce your time taken of farming when you're trying to get loads of CP. Diabear. Not only is it a good exploration tame with its speed, not only is it a decent fighter with its power, not only does it have actually fairly good carry weight for a combat, a more combat focused dino, but it can harvest, and it's especially good at harvesting honey. Diabear is good. If it was a little bit stronger, it would be an A, but it's low health and its slight difficulty to tame puts it down in the B tier. Dire Wolf. Now, Dire Wolf is sort of the opposite of Dire Bear. It's less useful, but really easy to tame a few of them, and then you get that pack boost, and you can just sort of unleash them on things. A pack of decent Dire Wolves can take down shockingly strong things, actually. Obviously not like Gigas and stuff, but they can take down alphas quite easily. A few Dire Wolves is probably your earliest, or in my opinion, like for me, would be the earliest things I would be able to get to take on like Alpha Carnos and stuff. I'm not sure if they manage Alpha Rexes. That would probably depend on their levels. Dung Beetle, it's really useful, but you don't need it. You can go the entire game without farming if you want, but if you're going to farm, the Dung Beetle's great. Giant Bee, on the same vein, you can go the whole game without honey, but if you want honey, if you want sweet veggie cakes, if you want extraordinary kibble, you want the Giant Bee. Who is actually not... Yeah, you want the Giant Bee, yeah. I was going to put him in A tier for a second there. I'm a bit unsure about the B, whether it... I can't decide if the B is A or B tier. Like, you don't need honey, but once you've got it, it's good. I'm going to keep him in B tier, because you can go through most of the game without that highest level of kibble, and just go down one level of kibble. Okay. The Penguin. You can breed him up for polymer whenever you need it. What's more to say? The Racer. Racers are great. They're really good berry tames. They're surprisingly strong. You can build awesome little structures on their back and go into the redwoods and feel safe and stuff. I think Racers are really good. The only thing that isn't putting them in A or S is how ploddy they are. They're very slow, bless them. Procticon, it has a really high carry weight, really good speed, really good jump. It can help you with your imprinting, and if you are careful, you can use it to solo the Broodmother. It's just a good tame. It's not, if it had weight reductions to anything, I'd put it in A straight away, no question. But it doesn't, so it's going to stay in B, unfortunately. In terms of flyers, I'm going to put both the Quetzal and the Tappy in here. I don't think either of them are good enough for A, but they're both decent tames. The Quetzal is here because it can pick things up, which is, it can pick up more than an RG can, which is sometimes quite useful. The Tappy is here because it's the easiest way to tame the Quetzal when you're playing single player. So those two together sort of go in B. Sarcosuchus. I want to put him in S. I think the Sarco is fucking brilliant, but in reality, he's a B tier dino. He's easy to tame, he's moderately strong, he's very fast in the water. He opens a lot of doors once you've got one, but he isn't quite on the rank of those A tier dinos. Stego is a difficult one. I could understand the arguments for putting Stego in A, but personally, I think Stego's a B tier. Really useful, really a very slow, if powerful combat tame, especially early on, but that slowness holds them back, that lack of damage holds them back. They're tanky, but they don't have the damage output or the speed to be an A. They're decent berry collectors, but again, nothing special, so they don't go in A. They're a solid B. Alright, this is where people get upset. Thyla! Thyla is a B tier dino on the ARK, and I am being kind to it putting it there. It is not the best cave dino. It is not usable in boss fights. It is not the best alpha hunting dino, in my opinion. It does a lot of stuff, but it doesn't do them as well as other things on the island. On Scorched, I would put the Thyla in S, as it is the best caving dino there, in my opinion. On the island, no. It's a B tier. Sure, you can come at me and say, oh yeah, but Yow, it's good for killing Titanosaurs. And alright, yeah, that's such a niche thing that it can do. You're going to do that how many times in a run? That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. By the time you have a Thyla and you've bred it up and imprinted it and you're thinking of killing a Titanosaur, what's the point? For some XP? For who? You? You'll probably be a decent level by then. You don't need that. For the Thyla? Well, what are you going to do with the XP that you get on the Thyla? You're going to level it up so it can go kill another Titanosaur? Like, it can't be used in boss fights, which is the thing that holds it really far back. And it's not as good a caving dino as some others on the island, which also holds it back. So that is the B tier. These are good tames, very good tames, but they're not excellent and they're not necessary. Let's go straight into the A tier. So we got Anki. Don't need to. So I'm going to just put a few in these, actually. Put a few really quickly in. So we got Anki. We got Castard with the beaver. We've got Doed. We've got Mammoth. We've got Megatherium. Yeah. So these five for metal, wood, stone, wood, and chitin are the best gatherers. These five dinos, you could swap the beaver and the mammoth, so realistically you only need 4 of them. So the Anki, the Doed, the Mega, and either the mammoth or the beaver. That is you set for resources for the game. They just trivialize the resource collecting process. They're brilliant. You almost always need them, but they're not quite in the S tier. But they are the very, very tippy top of the A tier. Okay. Baryonyx. It is the best caving dino on the island. Fight me on this. This isn't my personal love of the creature either. It's not just because it's a British dino. The Barry is the best caving dino on the island, in my opinion. Basilosaurus. Really, really good water tame, if somewhat large turning circle, but they're very simple and easy to tame. Like I demonstrated the other day, you can literally do it on a beaver if you're careful. So they're great for what they are. Easy to get and great for what they are. Okay. Rex and Spinosaurus. These two I'm going to put together. The Rex has a higher health pool. The Spinosaurus has, I think, the chance, the potential to have a higher DPS if it stands on its back legs and swipes, and if it gets its hydration bonus, it can do more DPS than a Rex, but has less health. So I'm going to put these two here as your quintessential boss tames. You can choose either of them if you want. You might need to breed a bit more with the Spino, but he's going to do it anyway, you know. He will get the job done. These two are boss fights. Now, why are they not in S? Well, I'll explain that in a moment. In fact, I will explain that right now. Let's jump straight into the S tier. So the S tier has... Let's look at the utility tames. So the S tier is the RG. Why is the RG in S tier? Because it's absolutely amazing. It can carry the Anki, it can carry the Doed, it can carry the Beaver. It gives all of those essentially an increased carry weight because it has such a high carry weight. RG is just amazing. Playing through my Mammals playthrough and not having access to RGs, I'm starting to see just how much I leaned on them in my first playthrough of the island. They're so good. Daedon, if you want to do boss fights multiple times, if you collect a bunch of artifacts and a bunch of tributes, and you want to farm that Brood Mother for cementing paste, you want to farm that Megapithecus for, I don't know, whatever, you want to farm the Dragon for element, you want a Daedon to heal your tames in between fights. Otter! I fucking love the Otter. The Otter is absolutely brilliant. Its insulation bonus will save your life. Its ability to carry more than one artifact will save you potentially lots of time, potentially hours over a playthrough. If you collect a lot of artifacts, if you want to do a lot of boss fights, if you want to get tech stuff set up before you do the tech cave and before you ascend, then you're going to want to grind out those bosses on the island, and having something that lets you pick up multiple artifacts is just priceless. Last utility tame is the Uteranus. So the Uteranus is what I said you would be riding instead of a Woolly Rhino. So that's why the Woolly Rhino is down here so much, because if you're on single player, you can choose to ride the Yutti or the Woolly. You choose the Yutti any day of the year, with its massive ability to buff the damage of all of your tames. It will make either your Rex or your Spino or your other boss fight tames just much better. Speaking of boss fight tames, the best one in my opinion is the Theri. The reason the Rex and the Spino are down here in A tier is because I think the Theri is a marked step up. So they can't be in S tier because the Theri is a definitive upgrade to them. Sure, little bit less health. I think it has a little bit less damage. But if you get a Theri, right, at level, let's say 300, equal stat distribution, and a Rex at level 300 with equal stat distribution, same quality saddle, but the Theri has some sweet veggie cakes, the Theri will win. It is a better tame. It is smaller. It can, so that means that you can get more of them around the boss easier. So that potentially their damage output as a group is higher. It can also collect resources in the form of massive hide collection, massive fiber collection. It's just a better tame than either the Rex or the Spino. Similarly, the Tusoteuthis is just better than everything else in the water. It's so fast, it's so powerful. When it does its little wiggle of death, and everything in the cave just dies. Tusoteuthis is fantastic. So that is my ranking for all of the standard tames in ARK the Island. We have two left. We have the Giga, and we have the Titanosaur. And I really don't know where to put these. I don't know where feels right to put the Titanosaur. I'm thinking he's a C tier dino because he has a use, especially on single player where you can turn off his starvation, if that's what you want to do. And his use is very end game. It's very niche. It doesn't really offer you any utility, but it does have a purpose, whereas everything in D tier doesn't have a purpose. So you got to remember the D tier are things that you should never tame. And I don't think you should never tame a Titanosaur. I just don't really, it's something you do to flex close to the end of your playthrough. So, keeping in mind that the D tier are things you should never tame on ARK the Island, that's where I put the Giga. I do not think you should ever tame a Giga on ARK the Island in single player. I don't think it adds anything to your playthrough. I think it takes an exorbitant amount of time. Its stats get nerfed into the fucking ground. You should probably just kill it for its heart so you can summon the Alpha Dragon easier. it's not going to give you anything in taming it. You just don't get anything from it. It's so much work for such a little reward. So there it is. I'm going to, yep, have a look at the screen. This is my taming list for ARK the Island in single player. Our S tiers are the Argy, the Daedon, the Otter, the Yeti, the Therry, and the Tuso. They are what I would consider to be the best tames on the island. And in order of, let's actually quickly order them. I would put the Argy at number 1, then the Yeti, then the Tuso, then the Therry, then the Otter, then the Daedon. I would put them in that order in terms of usefulness. So that means I think that Argy is the most useful tame, your most necessary, your most required tame to play single player on the island for ARK. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me ramble about dinosaurs that I'm not able to pronounce. I hope you've enjoyed my opinions. I hope that if you haven't enjoyed my opinions, we can maybe have a civil discourse about that in the comments. If I've ranked your favorite dino really low, I'm thinking about a certain someone and their Charlie over here. If I've ranked your favorite dino really low, then just tell me in the comments. Tell me why you think I'm wrong. I want to know why you think I'm wrong. If you think Thyla should be an S tier, you explain to me why, all right? And we'll have a chat about that because I think that's really interesting. So thank you very, very much for watching, and goodbye.